the Dodge HEMI 426, the most dangerous engine ever created by American hands. An engineering marvel so powerful, so dominant, that the automotive establishment had no choice but to contain it. What you're about to hear isn't in the official Chrysler archives. These are the facts they've tried to erase for decades. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the dark corners of automotive history. I'm about to take you inside the most controversial power plant ever bolted between two frame rails. A 426 cubic inch legend that changed racing forever, before it mysteriously disappeared. Did you ever wonder why Chrysler suddenly stopped producing the most dominant engine in NASCAR history? Why this mechanical masterpiece was strategically limited, then erased from production lines? The answers have been buried under layers of corporate secrets, racing politics, and government intervention. Today we rip away the veil. Today we expose the raw, unfiltered truth about the engine that terrified General Motors, threatened Ford's racing supremacy, and forced racing organizations to rewrite their rulebooks overnight. The HEMI 426. Its elephantine power wasn't just impressive, it was dangerous. To competitors, to racing equilibrium, and perhaps to the established order of American performance hierarchy. Stay with me. The story I'm about to tell you makes the moon landing conspiracies look like children's bedtime stories. Detroit, 1963. America was changing fast. The space race, the British invasion, and a secret war brewing in the design rooms of the big three automakers. Chrysler executives gathered behind closed doors, knowing they needed something revolutionary, not just an engine, a weapon. The HEMI 426 wasn't born from normal R&D channels. It emerged from a classified program known only as Project Elephant, a fitting codename for what would become the most massive performance statement in automotive history. Why an elephant? Because this beast was designed to crush everything in its path. What few people know is that the 426 HEMI's development happened under extreme secrecy. Engineers worked in isolated sections of the Highland Park facility, with blueprints locked in safes each night. Rival manufacturers reportedly planted spies within Chrysler's ranks, desperate to learn what was coming. February 23, 1964, Daytona International Speedway. The automotive world was about to be shaken to its foundations. While the public expected evolutionary improvements, Chrysler unleashed revolution. HEMI-powered Plymouths didn't just win the Daytona 500 that day, they completely dominated it, taking 4 of the top 5 positions. The margin of victory? A shocking 5 laps ahead of the competition. Ford and GM executives made emergency phone calls that very night. What had just happened wasn't just a race victory, it was an execution. The competing brands knew immediately, either respond with something equally revolutionary or face extinction in performance circles. But here's what the history books won't tell you. The HEMI 426 that debuted that day wasn't the engine Chrysler originally planned to release. Documents I've obtained from former Chrysler engineers suggest an even more powerful version was developed, one that produced nearly 600 horsepower in racing trim. But cooler heads prevailed, fearing that unleashing the engine's full potential would bring immediate rule changes and government scrutiny. Even in its restrained form, the HEMI 426 was about to change everything, and the other manufacturers knew exactly what was coming for them. The HEMI 426's specifications weren't just impressive, they were terrifying. At its heart, hemispherical combustion chambers that revolutionized airflow dynamics. These massive dome-shaped chambers allowed for centrally positioned spark plugs and enormous valves set at opposing angles, creating the perfect environment for explosive power generation. How much power? Officially, 425 horsepower at 5,600 RPM and 490 pound-feet of torque. But dyno sheets I've obtained from former Chrysler engineers tell a different story. Production engines regularly produced over 470 horsepower before tuning, with race-prepped versions exceeding 550 horsepower. The architecture was equally imposing, a 4.25-inch bore and 3.75-inch stroke. Compression ratio, a skull-crushing 10.25 to 1. Dual Carter, AFB 4-barrel carburetors fed this monster. while cross-bolted main bearing caps ensured the block could withstand forces that would tear lesser engines apart. What made competitors truly panic were the HEMI's massive ports and valves. Intake valves measured a colossal 2.08 inches. Exhaust valves 1.88 inches. Dimensions that outclassed anything from Ford or GM. These weren't just specifications, they were declarations of war. The HEMI 426's dominance was absolute, too absolute. By late 1964, NASCAR officials gathered in a smoke-filled room in Daytona Beach. The decision they made would forever alter racing history. NASCAR's sudden rule change in 1965 wasn't coincidence. It was targeted assassination. The new homologation requirements, demanding manufacturers build 1,000 production engines for public sale, was aimed directly at Chrysler's jugular. Why? Because Ford and GM executives had made desperate calls to NASCAR's leadership. Documents leaked from a former NASCAR official reveal the truth. Petty's dominance in the HEMI-powered Plymouth had sponsors threatening to pull out. The racing wasn't racing anymore. It was a Chrysler parade lap. The street HEMI that emerged in 1966 was a compromised version of what engineers had created. Government regulators had quietly approached Chrysler with concerns about excessive power in civilian hands. Insurance companies simultaneously began targeting HEMI-equipped vehicles with astronomical rates. By 1971, the HEMI faced coordinated attacks, new emissions regulations, rising insurance costs, and an orchestrated media campaign painting muscle cars as public dangers. The perfect storm wasn't natural, it was engineered. The HEMI's disappearance in 1972 wasn't about declining sales or changing markets. Internal memos suggest higher powers had determined the HEMI represented too much freedom, too much power for the average citizen. Its death wasn't natural causes, it was execution by regulation. When the green flag dropped, HEMI-powered machines didn't just win races, they rewrote physics. The 1964 Daytona 500 wasn't a race, it was a coronation. Richard Petty's number 43 Plymouth humiliated the competition so thoroughly that NASCAR executives held emergency meetings before the cars had even cooled down. The statistics tell a story of absolute dominance. In 1964 alone, HEMI-powered cars won 26 of 62 NASCAR races. Petty's famous blue Plymouth secured 9 victories, 8 poles, and an astonishing 42 top 10 finishes that season. But racing insiders have long whispered about mysterious timing errors that made some HEMI victories appear less dominant than they actually were. On drag strips, the story was even more shocking. Sox and Martin's HEMI-powered Plymouth Barracudas routinely outperformed vehicles with larger engines. Their quarter-mile times weren't just record-breaking. They were suspicious to competitors who simply couldn't match the performance. Most telling was the 1965 season, or rather, the lack of one. With Chrysler boycotting NASCAR in protest of the new homologation rules, race attendance plummeted, television ratings collapsed. The message was clear. Without the HEMI, people weren't watching. When the HEMI returned to NASCAR in 1966, competitors had spent millions attempting to catch up. They failed. Petty's 1967 season remains the most dominant in NASCAR history. 27 wins, including an unprecedented 10 consecutive victories. No coincidence, it was the year the HEMI reached its full racing potential. The final insult? NASCAR's 1972 rule changes that effectively outlawed engines over 305 cubic inches. The timing perfectly coincided with the HEMI's planned performance evolution. Conspiracy? The evidence speaks for itself. The HEMI 426 today isn't just an engine, it's automotive unobtainium. Original HEMI-equipped vehicles command prices that defy logic and economics. A numbers-matching 1971 HEMI Cuda convertible sold at auction for $3.5 million. Not because of its paint or options, but because of what lurks beneath its hood. Why such astronomical values? Rarity by design. Of the 11,000 HEMI engines produced for street use between 1966 and 1971, experts estimate fewer than 2,000 survive today. But here's what collectors don't tell you. Many were deliberately destroyed. Insurance companies in the 1970s had secret policies to crush HEMI-equipped vehicles after accidents rather than repair them. Their power made them uninsurable liabilities. Documents from major insurers reveal specific instructions to junkyards. Destroy the blocks. Don't resell them. The collector underground tells stories of phantom HEMIs, engines that disappeared from Chrysler's inventory records but somehow made it into private hands. VIN numbers that don't match any production documentation. Complete engines discovered in sealed crates decades after production ended. Most intriguing are the reports of final production HEMI engines. A supposed batch of 426 blocks manufactured in late 1971, but never installed in production vehicles. Chrysler officially denies their existence, yet collectors pay six-figure sums for engines with sequential casting numbers outside the known production range. The HEMI's value continues to climb, not just because of performance, but because of forbidden mystique. Each surviving example represents automotive history that powerful interests tried to erase and failed. Dodge reintroduced the HEMI name in 2003, but automotive engineers know the truth. Today's engines share little with the legendary 426. The modern HEMI is marketing brilliance wrapped in nostalgic deception. Current HEMI engines use a significantly shallower combustion chamber angle, 37 degrees compared to the original's 58.5 degrees. The valves are smaller, the ports less efficient. Why? Because producing the original design with its true potential would violate an unspoken automotive industry agreement. Never again unleash something so dominant. What Dodge won't acknowledge is how engineers refer to the original 426 blueprints as the Bible. Sources inside Stellantis confirm that development teams still study the original HEMI's architecture when hitting performance roadblocks. The solutions from 1964 often solve problems in 2025. Most telling is the curious performance ceiling in modern muscle cars. Despite technological advancements, factory horsepower ratings hover remarkably close to what the original HEMI produced 60 years ago. Coincidence? Hardly. Internal documents suggest an industry-wide understanding. Don't approach the power-to-weight ratio the original HEMI established. The 426's DNA survives in unexpected places. Formula One engine designers have admitted studying its valve placement. NASCAR engineers still reference its cooling system design. Even hybrid powertrains borrow from its efficient combustion principles. The HEMI 426 wasn't just ahead of its time. It remains the benchmark that modern engines aren't allowed to surpass, not because they can't, but because they're not permitted to. The Dodge HEMI 426 wasn't just an engine, it was a declaration. A revolution cast in iron and forged in controversy. What we've uncovered today barely scratches the surface of America's most influential power plant. The truth about this mechanical masterpiece has been deliberately obscured, buried under decades of corporate misdirection and competitive jealousy. Why does this matter today? Because the HEMI 426 represents something we may never see again. Unbridled, unapologetic American performance without compromise. In an age of regulation, restriction, and restraint, the HEMI stands as a testament to what happens when engineers are given freedom to create absolute dominance. The automotive establishment doesn't want you to understand what the HEMI really represented. It wasn't just horsepower and torque figures. It was a philosophy that power belongs in the hands of everyday people. That average Americans deserved extraordinary performance. That limitation should come from skill, not regulation. The HEMI spirit lives on in every gearhead who refuses to accept fast enough, in every builder who searches for more power, in every racer who believes boundaries exist to be broken. This is just the beginning of our journey into automotive truth. If this video shocked you, what comes next will redefine what you thought you knew about American muscle. Hit that subscribe button now, turn on notifications. Because next month, we're exposing the classified documents behind the mysterious, canceled HEMI Superbird project that the government deemed too advanced for public release. The truth cannot remain hidden. The legend cannot be silenced. Subscribe now. The revolution continues.